Hey everybody, very excited to be doing this interview today. We have Wired and we have the legendary Dave Lauer. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Thanks.
Much for coming in here, Dave. This has been a long time waiting. We definitely talk here and there, and you're full of market information. You've been doing this for well over 10 years. As people know that you used to work for Citadel Securities way back in the day, and you decided to make a change in life, and you left Citadel, and you've decided to educate the market and create platforms to educate the market and make it more of a balanced and competitive market for retail traders, industry whales, and everybody else. You've definitely been fighting against the OTC market. We'll talk about that a little bit today. You've been in a lot of interviews, professional interviews, some documentaries as well. I I really appreciate all the work that you've put in. It's a struggle because really it's like screaming at a wall because the whole market's against what you're fighting against.
Yeah, or at least the most powerful parts of it, certainly, and the ones that fund the most lobbyists and have the most political control. That's for sure. Right.
And we're finding out they're controlling the market, and we're finding as retail traders with this ape movement, we're finding out that there's a lot of disadvantages to us, and that's what actually got me migrating to you is because you're speaking out uh, against this for retail traders, and I really greatly appreciate it. And then that's where I discovered the terminal that you're creating, a platform for retail traders, to educate each other to validate information. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's been a trip. It's been an adventure. The last few months, kind of seeing the this new retail movement and learning a lot about the kind of people behind it and that are a part of it. I really kind of see it as Occupy 2.0, and I think that's great in a lot of ways. And the more I learned about it, and the more I spent time, after the Reddit AMA, really being brought into the community and enjoying that and trying to answer as many questions as I can and teach people about markets, and seeing the just complete lack of decent data or tools that were available to people, and the consequences of that, right? Like I get a lot of people give me a hard time on Reddit when I point out glitches in data and such. And a big part of that is I have built these market data systems. I've worked with people who have built these market data systems. I've seen how they work, and there are issues in the data, but I'm also used to professional quality data and tools. Like that's, I have worked for the most impressive firms from a data quality perspective in the industry. I've helped build these data systems. I've helped work with institutional asset managers on improving their data collection and analysis systems. So, I know that space pretty well. And seeing the kind of data that people had access to, the average person, through their broker or through whatever website they're using, it was just kind of shocking to me how bad it was, and the sort of simple things that these places weren't doing because they weren't incentivized to invest in their data management systems and analytic systems. And so that was really where this all started, was me and one of my business partners, since we had built over the last 5 years this exact kind of thing for large asset managers. And we said, well, why don't we see how we can provide this to retail and see what we could do if we could give them access to professional quality data and tools. And that sort of started started us down this path of saying, maybe there's more to it than just that. It's not just the data and tools, but all of this DD that's taking place, all this research. Can we give people a better platform to create that kind of research, collaborate on that kind of research within a community, and then share that research out onto whatever social channel they want? And so that's really where the idea for the terminal came from.
I really like it because here are some of the frustrations I have as a retail trader. It's like you said, a lack of information. But not only that is when we do get information, understanding the information, a retail trader can get a data set and they don't know where to start, what it means, how they correlate with
That's
everything
right.
else.
Yeah.
Or even just to put it blunt, like a lot of the data that we can get is raw. It's like a data stream. It's not a tool. So I really like that you guys are taking this data, you're putting it in a way that retail traders can understand it. You educate them on it, and it's coming from a trusted source. That's the next frustration I have is there's a lot of information out there by us retail traders, which is great. That's exactly what we want. But I feel a lot of the frustration that people have, especially people just getting into it, is who do you trust? How come you trust them? Where is the good source? We see that Reddit, such as Wall Street Bets, definitely, and it's carrying over to like AMC stock or super stock. It's where you're almost getting flooded with a lot of bad information, and you don't know which is good, and oftentimes it's manipulated to where the good information is buried, and it's harder for retail traders. So I really appreciate what your platform's doing, because it's going to provide one source, a reliable source that are with verified professionals that you can consistently reach out to and verify the information that's put out there.
Yeah.
It's where the industry needs to go.
Yeah, a big part of what we want to do is, first of all, we want to simplify things, right? I know the best source for market data, and I'm working with this great partner firm that I've worked with for years. And you pretty much, you ask anyone in the industry, they will acknowledge this firm they absolutely have the highest quality data. And so, that's where we're starting with simply just the best data, right? And then what we want to do is also want to provide educational resources around that data, but also around any data set. So another partner that we're talking to, actually, a company run by an old boss of mine, has all of this alternative data. And their clientele has been the highest end hedge funds in the industry. And when I approached him and I said, hey, why don't we provide this to retail? He loved the idea, right? He's like, this sounds really cool. And let's figure out how we can do it at the right price point that makes it approachable and accessible to as many people as possible. And then let's take, he has, I mean, honestly, hundreds of data sets. So let's take a few of them. Let's take the most important ones, the best ones, and the cleanest ones. And let's not just provide that raw data to people, but also provide, in-depth explanations and research that demonstrates the value of the data, what it can tell you, what it can't. I really feel like not just providing data, but putting it in context and explaining how it's measured, where it comes from, what it can tell you and what it can't. I feel that will do a lot to improve the quality of research, and then that can be accessible to anyone. So as we go through this process of building and developing the terminal, we're always thinking, what can we put out there for free, and we're trying to do as much as we can. Part of the problem with the data that most people have access to is that the incentives are completely skewed. If you don't pay for data, then the company providing it is not incentivized to make sure that you're getting the best data. And then there are also issues around licensing, because a lot of this data, there are per user costs. And so if we can get people who are at least willing to pay at a low price point, but still paying per user, we can provide really unique data sets to people that haven't had access to that kind of thing before, really high quality stuff. And that can sustain the entire effort, which lets us also put out there as much as we can for free. So like the educational side of the site will always be free, everything about that. And that's a big priority of ours.
I really like that, because that's another point I wanted to cover about Terminal that I read about. Is it seems like you guys are going to be lobbyists to these larger tool sets that are available to the industry whales that cost a ridiculous amount of money that no retail trader would be able to have access to. But now you're somebody that's reaching out to these companies and saying, hey, I have a community here that could generate revenue for you, that would love your resources. Can we work something out? And that's huge.
Yeah, that's right. And what's great is that for a lot of these companies I'm talking to, it doesn't cannibalize any existing source of revenue for them, because they're all focused on institutions. So they're very excited about it because of that.
Yes, exactly. You realize that your power, you know how to stay within your lane of knowledge, right? You know to reach out to resources, and that's what you have from your experience in the industry is know your lane, and then when you need help, reach out to the expert somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like I said earlier, when I encounter something I don't know much about, like this question around direct registration and settlement and clearing, is unfortunately it's just not something I've had experience with. At like a very micro level, it's like sure, I've heard of it before, but it's not like I've built software to do it like I have with many of the other things that I do feel comfortable talking about. But I know people who have, and I can reach out to them. I know people who have built stock exchanges for several stock exchanges, have created the order types, that sometimes are now considered questionable. It's created the high speed trading systems across the industry, and so it's always good to reach out to people that have expertise. I'm a big believer in that. If you know your own limitations, I think that takes you a lot further than thinking you know everything.
I agree, and that's what I love about the community. This giant neural network of many experts, and because everybody's amazing in their own little way, but they have an amazing amount of knowledge on specific topics. Nobody knows everything, and that's great to hear.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's take a look here. So we've been talking about market structure and how things are going and expertise. Speaking of which, also you said that you didn't know much about the direct registration, but you do know a little bit about the depository receipts, right? You handled organizing the Canadian depository receipts, which is very similar, guys. If you need some sort of context to the Brazilian depository receipts that everybody was talking about. But one question I do have about depository receipts, just based off of some information I had before, do you feel that a depository receipt makes a security illiquid?
So to clarify, I sit on the board of a Canadian stock exchange, and it's the stock exchange that built the Canadian depository receipt. So I'm familiar with it at that level. And then I also did, when I was in trading, I did quite a bit of interlisted and cross market arbitrage. So I did learn quite a bit about depository receipts then as well. So you're asking, does it make it illiquid, as in does it lock up shares on the primary exchange in order to support the depository receipts on the foreign exchange?
That's actually a really good way to put it, and to kind of maybe translate a little bit. It basically takes shares off of the current exchange we're trading on, and it locks them up in a bank because they're basically tied up and held for this other foreign market. It's the underlying assets that supports these BDRs, and so what you're saying is taking it off the main market, locking it up in this bank, which takes shares off of it, which makes less shares trading within the lit market. And when you don't have any shares or securities trading within the lit market, is called illiquid. So the market's not moving because nobody's trading. There's nothing there to be traded. Am I correct?
Right. So in theory, you could say that yes, if in the foreign market, you had so many shares purchased that it exhausted the float. In the lit market, then yes, the bank who is the sponsor of the depository receipt would have to hold all of those shares, and trading would dry up in the primary market. But that, I mean, I've never heard of that happening before, and that seems, if you don't have the entire float locked up on the primary market, it seems unlikely that you would get it locked up on a foreign market where there's probably less interest.
Agreed. And as we've seen too, is we've seen so many loopholes. I know a lot of people think a lot of illegal activities going on, but to be honest, everything we've discovered is legal loopholes. What have you been seeing as in corruption or just irregularities within the market, especially in the past 2 years?
Oh man, how do you even start with the corruption on Wall Street? It's I mean, I would say that just in terms of the market structure questions that we're interested in, the simple existence of retail internalization strikes me as an extremely corrupt practice that benefits nobody but the internalizers and the discount brokers. They will come out with studies and statistics showing how it benefits retail, but those are all, flawed studies. It's manufactured based on an artificially widened spread that exists because of internalization. So it's such an absurd argument, and yet they continue to make it despite having made the opposite side of these arguments in the past when they weren't making money from it. So to me that really is one of the most corrupt areas in the market in terms of the space that we're talking about.
I absolutely agree 100%. And just to reiterate what Dave Lauer's been fighting for 10 years, it's the over-the-counter market, the OTC market. And you guys have heard of OTC before, most likely probably the pink sheet penny stocks. And the best way to describe this OTC market, guys, is we have our market that we currently have. And what the OTC market is statistically at this point in time a new second market, but it's a dark market. It's unlit. All the price action that you see, the price discovery, the price improvement that you see is hidden in the OTC market. So that price action, if it's not visible, it doesn't move the price. So they're taking, and when he's saying the manipulation of retail, is they're basically taking all retail orders and channeling it into this OTC market, and statistically more through the river of liquidity called payment to order flow. So payment to order flow is an underlying bubble within the OTC. So when we say we want to ban payment to order flow, we want to investigate payment to order flow. In all reality, we want to look at the overlying problem, which is the OTC market, and that's why what Dave is doing is very, very important.
Yeah, that's right. We like to talk about payment for order flow, but that's more of a symptom than a cause. The real issue is this OTC trading, and I do want to clarify, when I'm saying OTC, I'm actually talking about over-the-counter trading of NMS stocks, which are pretty much all the stocks you're familiar with. The pink sheet OTC market is something separate with all sorts of issues there that I'm not qualified to talk about, because I'm really my experience is in the world of NMS, which is the national market system, that the stocks that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and the siphoning off of order flow primarily into Citadel and Virtu is, in my mind, damages markets, widens spreads, which costs institutions money, costs retail money. And it's a practice that there's no defense of, other than we're politically powerful and we're making a lot of money at it, so good luck changing it.
So I don't think we've ever really fully gone through the market structure of payment to order flow. I know we talked about the front end of it, and you definitely. So when I first was doing my research in DD, I had my assumptions, and it narrowed down to more of a understanding the market and understanding truly how things went. You definitely helped me in that process, especially on the front end. And so I'm just going to do a quick rundown for the audience, if we have some new ones, of what we've witnessed as the flow of your purchase. So you were to go on to what I like to call a pocket broker. I don't call them real brokers, because if a broker doesn't give you the opportunities that industry whales have, then it's not a real broker to me. But anyways, you go into your pocket broker, and let's just say you purchase your security. You want to buy 50 shares of a security, and you put in your order. That order is basically near real time through high frequency trading, and yes, they'll bundle all those orders of the same security together at that moment, and then they'll sell that order flow. And on the other end, you have somebody that's buying that order flow. And what we're seeing is clearing broker dealers that have wholesaler or market maker privileges, such as Citadel or Virtu America. And statistically, they're the major leaders on buying that payment to order flow. But as soon as that order flow is purchased, that transaction's done. Everything hit the ticker, or well, not necessarily hit the ticker tape, because it's a riskless principal trade, guys. That means that it's going to affect everything later on, or it already happened, is so you don't double book, price action. So at that moment, the order flow is sold. There's nothing going on there, but what happens after is the biggest thing. It's the hedging process from these clearing broker dealers or wholesalers or with market maker privileges. They have this responsibility to give a retail trader best execution, and you guys are going to hear that. That is the biggest argument against payment to order flow, and just about anything with retail traders. We're giving you better prices, but to be honest with you, at the volume of what retail traders order, they really do not care that much about price improvement. They just care about having their orders be transparent and sent to the lit market if we deem to be. But the biggest problem is in the hedging process. And so they will hedge from themselves in the ATS or dark pools through market makers such as Virtue America and CDRG, Citadel Derivatives Group. They actually do the market making for Citadel Securities. But they have this responsibility for best execution. So they're supposed to look across the broad market and say who has the best prices or the best execution, and then they route to that. So it could be in the lit market, it could be somebody else in the OTC in a private transaction, it could be in the ATS dark pools. But the problem we're noticing is because they have a large control of the flow, or if not all of it, they can, through technology front running, it's basically you have the technology and the power, and we'll definitely hit that up too, Dave, to see the prices before everybody else does. So it's like having market ESP. So now you have the control of the flow, market ESP. So you can beat every price on the market before it's posted. And so now you can take that order flow and direct it to, the ATS dark pools, and you can control that flow. And if you can control the price, you can control the flow, you control the flow, you control the price, and this is never ending loop. And that's the issue we're seeing. What are your thoughts on that, Dave? So
I think the broad strokes are mostly accurate. I think that as I've mentioned to you before, this whole bundling up of orders, that's not something that I know about. And I think most of the time, what will happen is that a retail investor or trader will send their order to their discount broker or wirehouse or whatever you want to call it, and then that order will go to the internalizer. The internalizer will take the other side of it. It happens very fast, as you're saying, within milliseconds. And that's a trade that is printed. And so it gets printed to the tape. Now, if there are subsequent trades to that, for example, like I as a market maker, if I just bought some shares off of you, I might not want those shares. And so I might go sell them to another market maker. And so that will print again. Whereas there's the potential for riskless principal trading, if I'm buying the shares from you and matching them up against inventory that I have that I'm short against, and there's some discrepancy in terms of timing, but there is no risk to that trade, then that's when you would have a riskless principal trade. And so that's to avoid that double counting of shares. But because let's say I sold some shares to Bigham's and I bought some shares from Wired, and there was a slight discrepancy in timing. Both of those buy and that sell would print, and then my riskless principal to net that out is what we don't want to print, because that would be essentially double printing. So that's at least how it's supposed to be done. Now, once I take the other side of that as a market maker, I'm, again, in theory, just trying to earn the spread. So I want to lay off that inventory as quickly as possible, unless I have edge in terms of a short-term, near-term price forecast. Like maybe I think the price is going to go up in the next 50 milliseconds, so I'm going to hold that inventory, or the next 2 seconds, but not much more than that probably. And if I don't have any edge on this trade, I'm going to just try and capture the spread. If I can't do that, I'm going to send that around through potentially through exhaust systems to other market makers, see if any of them want to take the other side of it, because they might have the opposite inventory and also be looking to lay off. And then the last ditch effort is that I'm going to go lay off on a lit market. And that's why, both from a retail perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, the way the institutional orders wind their way through the systems is distorted from a misalignment of incentives from brokers who are trying to minimize their costs as opposed to maximizing execution quality for the institutional clients. And so those orders go to dark pools. They go to electronic liquidity providers, aka high frequency firms. They can go to single dealer platforms, just like the single dealer platform Citadel Connect that people have talked about in the past. And then only the last ditch effort for that order is the lit market, the exchange. And so that's why that's one of the things that drives poor execution quality on exchange, is that the orders that get to the exchange are the ones that nobody wants to trade against. And this is a big problem. So earlier,
toxic orders, right?
Correct. And so earlier when before we started this, when you were saying, oh, shouldn't everyone just route their orders to an exchange? Unfortunately, that won't make enough of a difference. There's just no way, because not enough people will. You can't actually have 3/4 of all retail orders routed to exchange. And so without that structural change, without regulatory change, unfortunately, I don't think you can make a difference. You can maybe take those few cents of profit out of the internalizer's hands and at least get that order to an exchange. Sure, that there is some benefit to that, but without real systemic structural change and regulatory change, I don't think that you can actually fix this problem. And I'm a proponent of a rule similar to what you have in Canada and the UK and Europe and Australia, which broadly speaking is to say you can't execute off exchange without material price improvement, and material price improvement meaning a full tick if the spread is more than a tick wide, or at the midpoint if the spread is a tick wide. That is what's considered material price improvement. And without material price improvement, you have to route that order to an exchange unless it's a certain size. A large institutional block order should still be able to be executed in a dark pool.
There's been rumors about foreign, like the Canadian exchange and the UK exchange, about hedging and sending through the OTC market. It's definitely something I want to look into more, and I encourage anybody from Canada and UK to do more research in the market structure. I did want to clarify a little bit there, or just try to get a better understanding on your statement of you may feel that ordering to the lit market may not help, but I want to clarify it in a way. I feel that you said it in a way that as you don't feel we can get enough retail traders educated on the market structure and the importance of ordering to a lit market to cause a drastic change. And as in drastic change, I'm just talking about price improvement. I'm not talking about a MOAS per se, because it's going to take a lot more to get the MOAS to happen. Because I think a lot of misconception that going on right now is that we are able to put enough pressure on these market makers and these hedge funds and these giant corporations to cause the MOAS. But sadly, guys, you guys got to realize that their job is to hedge, to manage risk, to get ahead of it. And they're the richest corporations in the world, and they have the best talent in the world. At any movement on the market, they're making money. That's their job, even as market makers, right? They're not making money by shorting per se. They're making money by providing liquidity. As long as the security is moving, being bought and sold, they're making money, and that's what they're looking for. So when you say that buying the lit market may seem like an endless battle, do you mean just as in like you don't feel we could get enough people educated to make a visible difference?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, right? Like, what percentage of actual retail orders, in the best possible case, will be manually routed away from internalizers onto the lit market? I can't see it being material. Whereas if you had structural change, if you actually forced retail brokers to route to lit markets, then not only would that accomplish what needs to be accomplished, but it would bring more market makers onto lit markets. You know, the market makers will invest in trading on lit markets if they know that toxicity isn't as high on those markets as it is today. And so, you know, I think that you would see a greater diversity in market making as well, and you would see more resilient, more liquid markets. I think it would be a dramatic improvement to markets.
Oh yeah, it would be a whole new market. The market wouldn't even trade the same anymore. I really don't like how the market doesn't follow retail sentiment at this point in time anymore. And I feel if we go to the lit market, we will have more retail sentiment, and everything will be more visible. It'll be more competitive. It will definitely be way more liquid. The way I see it right now, AMC, we're just trading fake shares around. It's terrible, but. No, I really agree. It is a challenge to educate. So I feel this movement it's not about sticking it to the hedgies or whoever or everything or even the MOAS. I really want market change in education. I really like the education within the community. What terminal stands for, where we find something that we're great at and we teach each other, and then we can become something powerful that you can never build. You can never buy something like that, and you guys got to realize that. So I definitely appreciate, and I do agree with you. It is very challenging. I mean, look at just trying to get people off of what I call pocket brokers. That's hard in itself. Let alone educating to order to the lit exchange. So I challenge anybody that's listening right now. Prove Dave wrong. That we can organize as a community and educate each other on this. And when terminal comes up, we'll definitely be educating more beyond that. But no, I just wanted to clarify. I don't want Dave to seem like a bad guy. He's a realist, right? He speaks to the facts, and he doesn't like to speak outside of that. So
for sure, yeah. I mean, honestly, if 100% of retail decided to force their brokers to route to lit markets and did so consistently, that would do the trick. That would be a good thing for markets. I think that the only way to get there is for the regulators to force the brokers to route that way. I just don't know that you can get there otherwise. But I don't mean to discourage people, but there are real considerations because you might be giving up price improvement opportunities. Unfortunately, that's the reality, right? Is that you can have your broker, for example, try to route to IEX and see if there's midpoint liquidity there, and if there is, you'll get far more price improvement than that internalizer would have given you. And there are retail liquidity programs on certain exchanges that could result in material price improvement opportunities. But in the current market structure, the price improvement does come from the internalizers. It's messed up. It shouldn't be that way. But I'm wary of encouraging people to forego money in their pocket, unfortunately. So I don't mean to be speaking against something that I think would help, but the problem, like I said, I think that needs to come from the regulators.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely need more oversight. We need more transparency, and we need more regulation. 100%. And so, but the one thing I do try to preach to the apes is what's in your control. So when we look at regulators, yes, we should be aware, we should support, we should provide ideas. But I always stress that we should always focus on what's within our control as well. And so educating on the market structure, educating each other as a community on tools and resources to make you successful is the biggest thing. And we were talking about retail liquidity programs. I think this might be a good segue into Bigham's hanging orders? I forget the terminology every time. What is it?
Order imbalances.
Yeah, order imbalances. So these market liquidity programs, would that include that order imbalances there, Dave?
No. So those are two distinct things. But I'm happy to talk about order imbalances. It's an area. I guess I'd have to know specifically what you're thinking, but actually, one of the trading strategies that I had built in an area of research when I was a quant was in order imbalances around opening and closing auctions.
So we're noticing a large influx of order imbalances on some of these meme stocks. And the way I see, and this is where I'm going to learn a little bit, is the way I see order imbalances is, let's just say there's a large amount of retail orders hitting the lit market, let's just say NASDAQ, and they are just unable to fulfill those orders. And so they hang, and then you end up getting this order imbalance because there's no liquidity in the lit market. And so what ends up happening is all these order imbalances are sold off of the NASDAQ's reserve. Right? Is that what order imbalances is, just to clarify?
No, this is not something. I guess you'd have to explain to me. If an order comes in and it's not marketable because there's not liquidity on the other side of it, then really one of two things could happen. So let's say you send an order to NASDAQ to buy at the offer, but there is not an order on NASDAQ to sell at the offer. There is an obligation from NASDAQ in Reg NMS that they have to route your order to the exchange, which does have the national best offer. And so they would route that order to another exchange, which is where that offer is sitting. If your order if it comes in to buy and it's not at the national best offer, it's below it, then either your order would be canceled if it's an IOC order without executing or having any impact because no one would have seen it, or if it's a limit order, then it would be displayed, or if it's a hidden order, it might sit hidden in the book. It could be like a midpoint order, or it could be, on IEX, you could be sending a delimit order, which would be displayed, but IEX also has a depeg order, which is hidden. So, there are all sorts of different ways for an order to sit there without interacting with counterside liquidity, depending on sort of where the market is and where the price of the order is.
So how do we get order imbalances, and what are the repercussions of an order imbalance?
So when you say order imbalance, you mean like there's 10,000 shares to buy on the bid and only 1,000 shares to sell on the offer?
Big
that to me is what I would call an order book imbalance.
Yeah, order book imbalance.
Sure. So an order book imbalance comes about, just because there's more interest on one side of the book than the other. More displayed limit orders on one side than the other. It's very normal. I mean, that's most high frequency trading algorithms are built around that kind of imbalance and using it to forecast what's about to happen. Is the stock about to tick up or tick down? So if you have a large order book imbalance on the buy side, that suggests that there just aren't enough sellers at that price. And so the price will tick up. So if I see, let's say at an extreme, I see 100,000 shares on the bid and 100 shares on the offer. As an algorithm, I would have been, trained to expect that means that 100 shares on the offer is about to get taken out, and that price that is currently the offer is about to become the bid. So I might sweep that price level, take those 100 shares, and put in a bid at that price level, because now I know I'm going to be first in line. I'm going to be at the top of the queue at that new price level, and there are advantages as a market maker to being at the top of the queue, because if I get hit, there are usually going to be people behind me that I can scratch and lay off to.
Sorry guys, we dropped there. And then Dave, actually, what's your opinion on the CAT system versus the OAT system?
So CAT was proposed, I think in 2011 or so, in the wake of the flash crash of 2010, when regulators realized that they just didn't have access to the data to reconstruct what happened. And in 2012, when I was testifying before the Senate Banking Committee, and then the subsequent to that to the SEC, I said, hey, the CAT's a great idea, very important, absolutely something that needs to get built, but it's going to take many years. So why don't you build this sort of intermediary system, and I explained sort of how to build it and what it should look like. And you could build this in a year, and then you'll have an excellent data system to carry you through until the cat's ready. And of course, such a logical, straightforward thing was never acted upon, and it took maybe another 8 years to actually get the cat up and running. Yeah, I do get updates on it, and it's good to see the progress that's being made. I think a lot of the reporting is happening now from the brokers. I think there are still a lot of questions on who's actually going to pay for it. That is actually still an unresolved question. But no, the cat will definitely be far better than oats. And I think once it's fully up and running, it will be awfully useful. It will be as good as the thing that Canada built about 10 years ago. So that's great. We're only about a decade behind them. And so, I think it's important because I think regulators need to be data centric. But I also think it's kind of problematic when you don't have enough data scientists and engineers working for regulators. So I think there are simply too many lawyers working at regulatory agencies and not enough experts and data scientists. And I think that's a huge problem. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I think requiring sort of a minimum level of price improvement for off-exchange execution is important. I would also get rid of, like, I don't know, 90% of dark pools. I think dark pools are important and they serve a purpose, but I think broker operated dark pools are just a massive conflict of interest, and I think we should get rid of those. And then I think a couple of independent dark pools competing with each other and working on novel ways of matching people up would be a far better and much less complex model, and would also hopefully result in more orders going to the exchanges when that's needed. So to clarify, it's not 60% of orders in a dark pool. That's actually for stocks with high levels of retail interest. That's nearly all happening in the OTC market. So I think it's important that we understand, AMC and GME and other stocks like that are not being traded primarily in dark pools. They're being traded primarily in internalization systems off exchange. Now, when people hear that 60% or 70% of their orders are being executed in these internalization systems, that's actually misleading, because it's more like 100%. If you're retail, your order is being executed off exchange, pretty much 100%. And so, correct. Right. So when you see that 60% number, that's really just saying that 60% of the market in that name is pretty much retail, and then the other 40% is institutional trading or market making and proprietary trading, which is happening on exchange. So, that's when it's a pretty decent proxy. If, like, the average amount of off exchange trading is for the entire market is something like 40%, when you see a name trading 60 or 70%, that just tells you it's a name with very high level of retail interest, and that delta is that retail interest, and that's nearly entirely being executed off exchange. Yeah, so that's a good point. Market makers have an exemption. It's been there for a long time, and was put into Reg SHO when short selling became more highly regulated. And it is that if you're a market maker, you do not have to locate shares before you sell short. And in theory, there's a good reason for that, right? You want market makers to be nimble and to be able to continue to provide markets as things really get crazy. Now, the problem with that is, one, it used to be that market making came with what are called affirmative market making obligations, which said that you really had to be in the market for a certain percentage of the time within a certain percentage of the spread of the MBBO. And of course, that's just not the case with the way things work anymore. And so, that's been something where these market making firms have maintained the benefits, where they get paid rebates on exchange, they get payment for order flow payments, and they're allowed to, sell, essentially naked short stocks without, having the locator, the borrow locked up, without providing that kind of service that market makers used to provide. Now, I'm not arguing to go backwards, because market makers back then had all sorts of other problems, and markets were kept artificially wide by being quoted in fractions versus pennies. So, I would never argue to go backwards, but I would say that, generally speaking, it is questionable to me why market makers get benefits today, when they don't provide the same kind of service and are not under the same kind of regulatory obligation as they used to be.
Yeah, such as T6 settlement times. I think settlement times is one of the biggest issues.
Yeah, and I just think there is a lot of there are a lot of issues in terms of settlement procedures. There's just not a lot of transparency on it. There's obviously issues around failures to deliver and that kind of thing. And FINRA, if you saw their recent enforcement priorities, they came out and they specifically said, are market makers abusing their Reg SHO exemption? So that's something that they're going to look at. And they specifically said that they want to look at the FTD process and the clearing and settlement process. Now, it should have been something they've been looking at for a long time, but it's good that at least they're bringing it up and saying that they're going to look at it. So that does bode well. When FINRA starts to focus on something, sometimes it improves.
Sorry to interrupt, but you said Reg SHO exemption for the market makers. What exemption do they have on the Reg SHO?
Yeah, they are exempt from needing to locate shares before they sell short.
Oh, okay, that exemption.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if there was another one.
No, that's the one. Yeah.
Biggums, what do you got next here? You got a bunch of good questions, man.
Oh, can you guys hear me now? Sorry about that. So, playing off what you were just talking about, too, with them not being regulated, we were looking at the Overstock lawsuit, and they were talking about ways to push off the FTDs, like you were saying, involving sham resets and closeouts, where they do an ISDA contract with a large bank, a market maker and they have about 5 years for the flex options to expire, and they were able to fill with those. So that was something that I thought was interesting off what you were just talking about. But
yeah, I mean, I think, and that's in FINRA's in their request for comment that went out about this, they asked about stuff like this. They asked about better clarity in terms of disclosures and understanding, if options contracts are being used that way and if derivatives are being used to gain short exposure without locate. So, it's clearly something that they're spending time thinking about, but at the same time, you've got things like Overstock and other court cases that I've seen where you have those kinds of FTDs being sort of kicked down the road using different techniques such as options trades or warehousing or other things like that.
What do you got next there, Biggums? He must have cut off there.
Yeah. So, I was on mute there. I got to get going here in about 10 minutes here. So, I mean, Wyatt, if you want to ask any more questions here that we haven't really
absolutely.
covered.
Yeah, I've got about maybe 5 more minutes.
Perfect. I think we can do this in about 5 minutes here. I'll just shotgun it out. So something I want to talk about is in our conversation, I feel that I want to point out that the issue is not technically shorts that are happening from industry whales or retail traders or hedge funds. Yes, the Ortex data that we are seeing is the short data for a traditional short, but what the focus is on is a short created by a market maker that has exceptions to legally naked short a stock. And the importance on that is a short squeeze or a market correction is not going to cause them to cover these failure to delivers that are potentially, hidden out there with ways that they could in these exceptions. But I want to segue into the thought of blockchain technology in specifics to Overstock and T0. And what they did is they ended up purchasing an ATS system on the market, and they converted it to handle blockchain. From there, they brought in liquidity by converting shares into this blockchain currency. But then they minted a blockchain derivative, or not derivative, a blockchain dividend. And you shouldn't even really consider it a dividend per se, because all they did is when they minted this blockchain currency off of the security, is they were trying to create liquidity for this new ATS market. The dark ATS is basically like dark pool, guys. So for this new ATS market, which they were going to use to provide shares that could be shorted. They were just trying to redo the shorting system. Do you feel a blockchain that is built off of the underlying security, if built right, could cause these market makers and these hedge funds to cover?
I mean, it's, and don't get me wrong, I'm a pretty big fan of cryptocurrency. I've been fascinated by it from practically the very beginning. But I always ask myself when I'm presented with an application for blockchain, why not a database? And I don't see why not a database here. If you had a firm, like the DTCC, for example, maintaining a database adequately, accurately, without any kind of issues or corruption, I don't know that there's any difference between that or blockchain. If in so much as blockchain is public and transparent and immutable, then yes, if you absolutely can't trust an organization to maintain a database, and it has to be public and transparent and immutable, then I guess so. But it kind of feels like it's you're doing it because you can't get around a problematic level of corruption or something like that, or flouting of the rules. And I would say let's just address that issue head on. But so I don't know. I don't know if that's a good answer, but like I don't see from a technological perspective why you need blockchain, but maybe that's not all we need to consider.
That was an amazing comparison, actually.
Oh, I mean, I think that actually the FINRA proposal is very good. I think that would go a long way. That FINRA needs the insight into these firms at the account level to understand who's short and how, not just borrowing, but also using derivatives. I think that's very important. I think the data that's being made available needs to be consistent. There's very inconsistent data, both from a time period and a disclosure frequency perspective, that needs to be fixed. There are data sets that are very misleading out there, that are really problematic, like when you see the level of short trading on exchange, and you see if 90% of the trades in a name are short. That's not necessarily because 90% of the trades were short. It's just a way that the market makers are marking their orders. So there are all sorts of problems in the current disclosures that I believe FINRA is trying to fix. And so I think those are really strong steps forward, and I'd like to see more of that, and I'd like to see it implemented quickly. I think that's part of the problem is and what I will be pushing for. I do sit on a committee that advises FINRA, and I have continued to push for them to move quickly on disclosure and transparency issues. And I don't know that I can say that it's helped, but I continue to push because I think they need to move fast on this kind of stuff.
I did want to circle back to the blockchain. Sorry about that. You made a really good point that I wanted to capitalize on is why can't a database fix it? You're absolutely right. So, with a blockchain, it's like multiple databases that validate and check each other. So I agree. Yeah, why can't a database do it? They could do something like the CAT system and have multiple CAT systems for different regulators that work on each other to make sure it's fair and equal, and there's this checks and balances. Totally agree. I did want to stress to the listeners, though, that Dave is looking for market perform and to fix the market overall in the large picture. I did want to say that by inherently minting a blockchain off of the underlying security, it does provide an opportunity or a situation where failure to delivers do have to be covered, but I don't want people to focus on it in that aspect. That's just a repercussion of what happens when you do mint it. There are great opportunities for businesses to create this second market if they do it properly. I just didn't want to discourage anybody to say, hey, but Overstock was able to do it. Yes, but what Dave is saying is it's just a band-aid. It's not really a true solution for the overall market. He's absolutely right. The CAT system is part of that, of what he's talking about, of this auditing system. And then I feel if you want to tie it into a blockchain system, like type of checks and balances, you would need multiples of it. Am I correct, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. I just with the type of listeners we have, I don't want to discourage anybody on anything, because a lot of people do a lot of really good hard research, and I want to segue back into this again. Is there's so much really good ideas within the community, and I highly stress you guys to go to Dave's Reddit, because for the terminal, they're building this platform for retail traders, and they need your guys' amazing ideas. I get DM'd every day. Bigums gets 10 times the DMs I get with amazing ideas or amazing DD, and we need to find a reliable source, because Reddit's kind of out of the wall right now. It's not really a good source for me. But I do trust your Reddit, because you do have moderators, professional moderators, and checks and balances there. So I bring your ideas to Dave on Reddit. Anything to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You know, I think it's the subreddit is called Urvin Finance, URVIN Finance, and you know, yeah, that's where we're looking to have these conversations and understand, you know, what people want the terminal to look like. Because you know, we want to build it for this community, and we want to work with this community, and we want this community to own a piece of it through our crowdfunding campaign. And I'm just really enjoying the experience, and I'm excited to build it.
I'm excited too, because we have a great opportunity, and I really, like I said it once, I can't say it enough. I really appreciate everything you do. Bigums,
Sure,
what are your
thanks.
thoughts?
I appreciate it.
No, I mean that platform you're making is amazing, and like you said too, thank you for bringing all the awareness to the, you know, the, what I wouldn't want to say corruption, but the way that they're able to manipulate markets, and you know, the way awareness to how the system isn't set up correctly. So thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Everyone have a good day.
Great. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate your time.
Sure thing.
If you ever need anything from me, just DM me at any time. I'm there for you.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Be safe.
All right.
Good night.
Yeah, you too.